Thank you, John, for the reading. What a beautiful text. Is everyone awake? Is everyone awake? No, I was just thinking, I think it's rather serendipitous that July 4 has landed on the Sabbath this year. As Georgiana was reading the text from Luke, it's a picture of Jesus on a Saturday, on a Sabbath day, coming into the temple to proclaim the good news of freedom and liberty to all. And so in some ways, I'm seeing some parallel to what we are doing here today as a community. I've been in the United States for 10 years now, approaching 11. And every one of my 4th of July experiences has been centered around fireworks and parties. My first year here, I went to a barbecue, and I can share this with some confidence because I remember being in shock of how much meat there was. My little majority world Adventist brain could not comprehend so much meat for such few people. The next year, we attended one of those parades where a convoy of patriotically and fantastically decorated golf carts drive past crowded neighborhoods, all hoping to win the prize for best patriotic and decorated cart. I've been to 3 of those, actually. Once, and please do not ask me how, because I myself don't know how I ended up there, but I ended up around a bonfire somewhere on the Oregon coast with a group of IT professionals. Do you know how strange it is to be the only sober person in a group of drunk, nerdy, non-singers singing Korean pop songs on the 4th of July? What an experience. And don't get me wrong, I like a good party. I do. Those who know me well know that. I'll be the first person to say yes for a party. I'll celebrate anything. But there's a part of me, and I think it's the pastor in me, that has always wondered over the years whether the way many of us observe the 4th of July deserves a little more reflection. And the question I keep asking myself, and even more so now that I'm a citizen of this country, America, is how different might our communities be if alongside our cookouts and picnics and brunches, we also did something a little more intentionally formative on this holiday, like what we're doing today. Or perhaps what we're forced to do today because it's the Sabbath day. And we couldn't just have a barbecue and be done with it. Could we? You know, and I only learned this very recently. I came across the filmmaker James Friedrich's discussion on this subject, but I found out that throughout the 19th century and well into the 20th, Independence Day was more than celebration. It was also an opportunity to reflect on the kind of people Americans had become and were called to become. And a central part of this pedagogical tradition was the 4th of July oration. Does anyone remember that? If you do, you remember these as long, as someone put it, long oral fireworks. Long public addresses that recounted the great events of the nation's past, publicly celebrating its achievements while calling each new generation to embody the same commitment to liberty and the common good that had inspired the country's founders. The underlying conviction was that the celebration of independence could never just be a national exercise of patting ourselves on the back. Look how great we are. Look how free we are. Look how amazing we are. The commemoration could not be separated from an examination of the present. In other words, the underlying conviction was that the nation's founding ideals were to be held every year as a mirror to each generation in a way to ask how faithfully those ideals were being lived in the present. For example, one 4th of July oration delivered in 1838, just 62 years after the Declaration of the Independence was signed, the orator pointed to the irony of church bells and cannons ringing out in celebration of liberty, while at the same time, in that same land, the clanking of chains could still be heard on the limbs of more than 1 million enslaved people. More than a celebration, a mirror for the present. Another, delivered on the eve of the First World War, called upon the nation to lead the way in rejecting war as an instrument of national policy. Hello, somebody. The message of these orations were clear. Every generation must wrestle anew with the meaning of freedom, with the meaning of equality. There must always be a thoughtful, and to use a biblical word, a prophetic conversation about liberty and the common good around the smoker and the grill. If Independence Day celebrates a radical break from the past, from a tyrannical past, as our mythos will have it, there must always be a courageous challenge to tyranny, injustice, and oppression at all 4th of July parties. Can't just be pomp and parade. There must be some serious reflection. Because to do otherwise is to dilute the moral and existential meaning of words like liberty, freedom, life, equality, and the common good, and reduce them to little more than poorly understood slogans rather than moral ideas by which we are willing to live and wrestle to create in our society. And so I'm glad that this 4th of July falls on a Saturday, taking a page from Jesus' own speech in Luke 4, because it's given us room for both feast. We had a wonderful brunch this morning, but also radical self-reflection. What is the state of our country today, and how well do we embody the ideals that the founders of our country put together as ideals worth pursuing in this world? You know, I was reminded again this week, actually I was reading Tom Chat wrote a little speech 2 years ago, July 6, 2024, and he read it up here, I think. But it reminded me, reading, if you have the bulletins for the 2 years ago, if you want, I can send it to you. It's beautifully written. But it reminded me, as I was reading this, it reminded me that the American experiment, which centered around the idea that the idea of the inherent dignity and equality of every human person, that experiment is not over. Sometimes it may feel like it is, but it's not. It's really not. Because all of us here in one way or another are still building this country. 250 is a lot. But as a country, there are countries out there who are 2,000 years old. Teenagers, you and I are still building this country we call America. Which I think is very hopeful, because it means that we no longer need to cling to the illusion that we, Americans, are somehow exempt from the old patterns of human corruption, or that our nation has been spared from the shadows that fall across all human hearts. We can tell the truth about our past and our present without surrendering the progress we've made and without surrendering the hope for a future truly guided by the ideals that we hold dear to us: equality, freedom, liberty, the common good of all persons. And we can do that because we refuse to give up. After 250 years of trying to make this work, we won't give up. We refuse to retreat from public life. And as followers of Christ, we refuse to abandon our biblical calling to do justice, to do love, to do mercy, and seek the flourishing of our neighbors and the common good of all people. I'm glad 4th of July landed on a Sabbath today. Aren't you? Now, I don't want to tell you how to celebrate your 4th of July. I don't know what traditions you already have. And I certainly dare not imagine that from now on, every year you'll submit yourself to long speeches about civic and prophetic responsibility, although I hope that you do secretly. Not so secretly now, I guess. But the liturgist in me wonders if you would think of adding a new tradition, a ritual of some sort, to your 4th of July celebration tradition. It doesn't have to be something big, but something formative, something that connects you further into the biblical and civic ideals of liberty and equality. Something challenging, perhaps, something prophetic. Something that could connect your celebration, your commemoration, to something bigger even than the idea of a nation. I really hope you think about this. Again, it doesn't have to be big. Pastor Rebecca and I were talking about this just 2 days ago. You know, when we have birthday parties, we don't just do birthday parties. We have a moment in a party where we have people, share things. What wisdom did you learn? What's challenged you this year? As you're 1 year older, what has challenged you? What wisdom can you pass? Or what was difficult for you? How are you hoping that your life is better in this year to come? And I don't know if you already do this for July 4, but I've been here 10 years, and every July 4 parties, none of that happened. I might have been going to the wrong parties, is maybe what I'm hearing here. But I think it's important to find a moment in our celebration to look in the mirror of what we believe and ask ourselves, how well are we living out these ideals that a lot of people have fought for, have struggled for, have sacrificed for? So think about it. For today, though, I will leave you with a dream. This is the recurring dream of an 8-year-old Hopi girl. You might recognize this dream because it's a very similar dream to what Isaiah recorded in the text that was read earlier. And to me, both these dreams feel like God's idea of words like life and liberty and equality and the common good. Anyway, here is what some 8-year-old girls dream about. It's in your bulletin. You can follow along. Older people are sitting in a circle, and they are brothers and sisters. Everyone. That's when all the spirits will dance, and the stars will dance, and the sun and the moon will dance, and the birds will swoop down and they'll dance. And all the people everywhere will stand up and dance. And then they'll sit down again in a big circle, so huge you can't see where it goes or how far. If you're standing on the mesa and looking into the horizon and everyone is happy. No more fights. Fights are a sign that we have gotten lost and forgotten our ancestors and are in the worst trouble. When the day comes that we're all holding hands in a big circle, no, not just us hoppies, everyone, then that's what the word good means. And the whole world will be good. When we're all in our big circle, we're going around and around until we all get to be there. We're going around and around until we all get to be there. Doesn't that sound like God's dream? The wolf will live with the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the goat, the calf and the lion and the yearling together, and the little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear, their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. Can you imagine it? The infant will play near the cobra's den, and the young child will put its hand into the viper's nest. They will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Happy feast, church. Happy reflection.